Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. You don't have to be somebody who's an artist to get something out of this, but you have to love fountain pens. Today I'm going to do a fairly quick review. I want to talk about a pen that for some reason almost no one talks about. It sort of came and went. But also it's an opportunity to sort of do something which we talked about at the Philadelphia Pen Show on a panel, which was this sort of the idea of what we might call vintage modern, which are pens that are old, that aren't being made anymore, but they're not really antiques. They're not that old. They could have been made in the 90s, right? And particularly if you're starting to collect pens, fountain pens, that might be appealing because a lot of those pens aren't necessarily expensive. Now, I'm a huge fan of Pelikan pens, particularly, as I said again and again, that the M800 is my favorite pen, and I like some of their other pens too. I'm intrigued by what things that the company does, and over the years, they've made many, many types of pens. I think they have tried very hard in the last 30 years to compete with Lamy. So they have their Sovereign line, their classic fountain pens like the M800 or the less expensive M200 line. And those, I think, sell well and people love those pens. But I don't think they've been as successful as Lamy has been in creating pens that people think of as very contemporary and new. And you see them trying to do that. And recently I came upon a pen that is very unusual. This is the Pharo pen. It's called that obviously because of the way the cap looks. It's reminiscent of an Egyptian pharaoh, I assume. And it's a bit bizarre because in a certain way it looks contemporary, but I guess it looks kind of old as well, and it's just strange. But it is definitely unusual in fountain pen land, and it was made in the beginning of the 21st century, and it seems to have left no mark. Hardly anyone has reviewed this pen or talks about this pen, and it's sort of rare. It was not an expensive pen to begin with. I think it was certainly under $50, maybe somewhere in that range, as far as I know. But to tell you the truth, I can't find very much about the pen other than the model number is P72. I can show you how it appeared in a catalog for Pelikan, and that's sort of it. I don't know what they were thinking of. Why, for example, Egyptian? Well, what was going on in the world that suddenly made Egyptian art or Egyptian style appealing? Could it be the mummy movies? I think about the 19th century really was when there was a kind of Egyptian mania that occurs in the 19th century with wonderful art and architecture using the Egyptian style. In New Haven, where I live, there's a beautiful gate on a cemetery that sort of shows you that style of Egyptian inspiration. Later in the 30s, of course, there were things like the mummy movies, and that, I think, made Egyptian art somewhat appealing to people, or made people think about that. In my lifetime, there was a famous King Tut show.
I'd like to talk seriously just for a moment. One of the great art exhibits ever to tour the United States is the Treasures of Tutankhamun, or King Tut. King Tut.
So that brought in a certain kind of Egyptian mania. Of course, this is all before the advent of this pen. What's more contemporary with this pen would be the more recent mummy movies. But I'm not sure that's what they were thinking of. I'm not sure what they were thinking of. Interestingly, recently both Monte Grappa and Mont Blanc have introduced Egyptian homage pens. Monte Grappa has a elaborate, really, it's a sculpture of a mummy Tutankhamun pen that I don't think is really meant to be used to write with. Mont Blanc has come up with a very expensive Egyptomania pen that I think is supposedly almost 60,000 euros. If you don't want to buy it, there are only 72 of them made. The Monte Grappa, in comparison, is a bargain at around 3,000 euros, I think, around somewhere in there. The Mont Blanc makes a less expensive Egyptomania pen for $700, $800, I think. But interestingly, it's supposed to allude back to a pen that they produced in the 1920s that was an octagon pen and was referred to as an Egyptian pen. It's quite subtle in the way that it refers to Egypt, with having some hieroglyphic designs on it. I think actually, maybe only unconsciously, the design that really influenced the Pharo pen is the so-called slinger pen by Parker, which was a ballpoint pen that you wore around your neck. It was also called the swinger pen. I have a feeling that maybe calling it a swinger pen was too controversial, so they changed it to the slinger. I'm not quite sure how that works out historically, but nevertheless, the top of that pen, and I remember in the 70s and 80s, you would see particularly women wearing these very large pens around their neck, and then the idea was you wouldn't lose your pen. And I think that the cap very much harkens back to that design, but I have a feeling that maybe the designers would deny this, but nevertheless, I think it was in their heads when they came up with this idea for a pen. Now, it's made out of what's attractive about it is definitely the material, the aluminum, brushed aluminum, I think is quite nice. It is a very heavy pen. This is with a cartridge. It's 37 grams, which is quite heavy. If you just weigh the cap, it weighs 17, almost 18 grams, the cap alone, which is very heavy. It is 5.5 inches long when it's capped. Posted, it is 5.8 inches. You can see on the top that it says it has the famous Pelikan and the one chick top. It's kind of unusual, and on the bottom it is just finished in this nice brushed aluminum way. It's a screw cap. It posts very, very securely. If we look inside the cap, you can see that there's a kind of plastic inner cap that actually protects the brushed steel when you post it, and also helps keep the nib wet. It is a small nib, but a traditional type of nib. This is a traditional nib on a feed, and it's friction fit, so you can pull it out. It's got ingot on. I'm not going to do that now. It is a cartridge pen. So you see it now has a cartridge. I was not able to get it to work with a converter. I've read online that you can work with a Pelikan converter, but it didn't work so well for me. It really is marketed as a cartridge pen. The clip, like so many other Pelikan pens, is meant to emulate a pelican beak, but it's a bit small, this clip, and doesn't quite function as well as it should. The other thing to be said about this pen is that the section is really small. And I find that to be uncomfortable when you write with it. Excuse me. Just to give you a comparison, here is the section on the M800, and you can see how much smaller the section is and narrower on this pen. So what do I think of this pen, the Pharo pen? Well, actually, I kind of like the way it looks. I mean, it's unusual. I'm all for pens that don't look all the same. So I like that. I'm not sure why the cap has to be so heavy, and the pen in general, I think, is a bit too heavy. The section is definitely too small, and because it's a metal pen and brushed all the way through, it is very slippery. So it isn't the easiest pen to write with. I'm beginning to realize that I think a lot of these pens that pen companies make, they think that they almost assume that people aren't going to write with them very much. Because otherwise, how do you explain the existence of so many slippery pens? I mean, and in truth, maybe that is the way it works. People buy beautiful pens, not necessarily to collect, but as something that they use very infrequently, and they're not usually in a day to day. That's the only thing I could think of. Just also in terms of the clip too, which is tends to be it's not long enough. It's not doesn't function well enough as a clip, and you sort of think. So I say, what were they thinking when they were putting together a pen like this? And the proof is in the pudding that clearly this was not a very successful pen, although they kept it in circulation for a while. I read when it was being sold, some people liked it because it writes so well. The nib is really good. That it was hard to get even when they were selling it. So it never seems to have been a terribly popular pen. As a collectible, though, of course, that makes it rare. Yeah, but on the other hand, things to be valuable as collectibles have to be desired. And so far, this is not a pen that a lot of people have desired. But I think it's fun the way it looks. And the nib is really quite terrific for what was a fairly inexpensive pen. I got this used for around $40. So, although I've seen them anywhere $80, $100. The one thing that I am missing that is intriguing is that I've read that it came in a nice metal box that reminded people of a sarcophagi. So I'm curious what that looked like. I've not been able to find on the web anywhere a picture of the box. And so if somebody's watching this and they have one with the original box, it'd be cool if they could send me a picture of it. I'd love to see that. Other people may have other experiences with this pen, and maybe there are people who like slippery pens. So how does it write? It posts very securely, by the way. It's medium. It is Pelikan. Is royal blue. And this is rodeo paper. And it is quite smooth, a little bit of feedback. It's almost like a pencil. Very nice, very pleasant nib. No flex to it at all. Not too wet, not too dry. Very good writer.